Man, the outsiders are absolutely soaring for the GOP, but a retread may actually be entering, or at least waiting in the wings for the Democrats. Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson joined me yesterday. He shared his thoughts regarding the importance of unity, regardless of your political affiliation.
When the jihadists get here, they're not going to ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican before they cut your head off. Right. When our financial foundation collapses, it's going to collapse for everybody. We need to get our act together and stop fighting each other.
Joining me now, Kirsten Haglund, Miss America 2008, and Chris Hahn, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer and progressive radio show host. Chris, since you're remote, I'll start with you. You know, we touched on this a little bit, but almost every single day, it's amazing. These polls come in, and these guys are absolutely resonating, and there's this theme on both sides of the aisle where it's just like, you know, we always talk about throw the bums out. I think they're serious this time.
Well, look. The excitement's always going to be with the person who could say the most outrageous thing, whether it be on the left or the right. And what you're finding right now in the polls is that the extremes are where the excitement is. The guys in the middle, the people who want to govern, or the women who want to govern, and the men who want to govern, it's very different. Bernie Sanders could say whatever he wants. He's got very little organization behind him. He could come up with some extreme ideas. He's probably never going to govern. He will push Hillary Clinton to the left, which is very good for the party. And the same thing with Donald Trump. He could say whatever he wants, and he could push that party in that direction, which might be good for that eventual nominee as well. So I think what we see right now is we see where the excitement is, where people could come out and say what they want. Because let's face it, people are tired of the same old that they hear from politicians every day. But at the end of the day, you date the extremist, you marry the solid centrist. I
hear you. Well, Kirsten, there's one thing about excitement. There's another thing about poll numbers. And I know people say, well, if you go back, I don't remember a non-politician, maybe going back to Ross Perot, right. And then before then you probably have to go back a few decades before you could find someone in a group of people. It's not just one. Now we see, you know, Carson soaring. We see Carly Fiorina soaring. We see, Bernie Sanders, who is a politician, but he's certainly not in your traditional vein of politician. There's something more. It feels like there's something more to it. Maybe a year from now I'll look stupid, but right now it feels like there's something, a major shift.
Well, you always see people kind of surging early that maybe don't end up being the nominee for both parties. But I think it's that skepticism for institutions in general, not just politics, but education and the church and the school system. I mean, so many things is at an all-time high. And so when you see someone who comes in and is not afraid to share what they think, they're unfiltered, people really love that and they gravitate toward that. So what we're going to see is if those early poll numbers actually translate into votes. And right now, it's looking like it. And when you see the second person in Iowa polls, at least, being Ben Carson, number one, Donald Trump, two, Ben Carson, I mean, they're both political outsiders. They've got something.
I think Carly is number 5. And so here's the thing, though, Chris. One person, yes. 3 people, it does feel like there's something here. And I think it is resonating. And we've always heard for a long time, everyone says they're completely dissatisfied. And I'm glad Kirsten brought it up because it is a dissatisfaction in large institutions. But there are a lot of, we can't really necessarily change the church. We can't necessarily change the school system, not right away. But we can. We have an amazing opportunity to change Washington. And this time, we don't have the conflict of keeping our bum in and getting rid of the rest. Everyone can vote at the same time and say, yeah, we finally agree. Let's usher in a new era.
Well, look, that's the beautiful thing about America. We don't have revolutions in the streets. We go to the ballot box and we change our government. And look, we've seen this play before where the extremists have risen and fallen throughout the cycle. The difference here is the guy who's really driving the conversation on the right in the Republican Party, Donald Trump, he's got billions of dollars and he's ratings gold. He will stay around for a long time because people want to cover him because he will say outrageous things. He's the Christopher Hahn of political campaigning right now. People put me on TV because I'm good at it.
He's at some dinner right now telling everyone the same thing. Kirsten, from an economic point of view, I think also people are thinking these are people who can think outside of the box and maybe change the economy. And I think they could talk people into maybe making certain sacrifices that politicians, Washington, D.C. How could Washington, D.C., when it had a $150 billion deficit last month alone, talk me into taking Social Security 3 years later?
Exactly.
Maybe one of these people could.
It's the real world experience that people value and that people see in Donald Trump. And they like the fact also that he's not a politician in Washington who's controlled by special interests, who will actually be able to make economic decisions for this country based on real world common sense.
I think Carson Marcy Fiorina and Trump all could persuade us to do things that none of these other people could. We got to leave it there. I'm sorry. Hey,